call this meeting of the Harbor Commission to order, September 20th. Mary, would you please call the roll?
Betsy Kramer.
Present.
Bill Spicer. Absent. Corey Bantalan. Here. Eric Friedman. Here. Frank Kelly.
Here.
Jim Sloan. Here. Helene Webb. Here.
Mr. Friedman, are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, there are no changes.
Thank you. And this is the point we'll have public comment for anything that's not on the agenda. Seeing no one, close public comment. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. Mary?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain? Minutes passed. Department update, Mr. Friedman, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Since we last convened, there was the Council approved an emergency purchase order for in the amount of $34,000 to TRJ Refrigeration for the replacement and installation of a compressor on the ice house, which Carl will fill us in a little bit more on the details of that, I'm sure, in his facilities report. Also, the Council approved a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Clean Seas for their oil response vessels at $2,200 a month in the lease area adjacent to the Marina One F-Finger end tie. Additionally, the Council approved to waive the formal bid procedure to purchase, I believe, 3 more Luke machines from Digital Payment Technologies. So we waived the bid procedure since we did that starting out, and we want to stay with the same equipment for consistency. So we're in the process of acquiring those machines and installing them in the Cabrillo East and West parking lots, hopefully, if not by the end of the calendar year, certainly by the end of the fiscal year. On August 15th, Carl Treiberg and Mick met with Colonel Mark Toy and Deputy District Engineer David Van Dorp from the Los Angeles District of the Army Corps of Engineers. They were on the way through town visiting a number of harbors. They had quite a busy schedule up Southern California, and dropped in for a harbor tour and a discussion of what it is we do here in Santa Barbara and what our dredging needs are and so forth. And Mick and Carl took them on a boat tour around the harbor and talked about the various assets that we have, the commercial fishing fleet. They were particularly interested in seeing of course, the Coast Guard presence. Also, the oil response boat was good. But what really seemed to pique their interest was the arrival of a new Ponga chaser, for lack of a better word, that Homeland Security has brought in, a very fast response vessel, 4 outboard engines, much more well appointed than the Pongas they're seeking out. So that boat is currently in the harbor on visitor status, and they've been reconnoitering the coast in preparation for interdicting these drug smuggling and human smuggling operations. And they were particularly interested in that federal presence, so we'll be working with them on that. They may be interested in some office space in the harbor as well. And then finally, in terms of tentative agenda items for the October meeting, we'll be working this next month on updating the Waterfront Department's 6-year capital improvement plan, as all departments will citywide. So our intention will be to flesh that out and bring it to you at the October meeting, along with whatever else we can get together. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Any questions? Anybody? Commissioner Sloan.
On that Ponga chaser you mentioned, have they formally said that they're going to have a long-term presence here, or are they just kind of here and they're talking about it type of thing?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, they're very interested in it. They have a lot of pots of money that get juggled back and forth at the federal level, and how monies are distributed for Homeland Security is often the function of political pressure from one point or another. But at the level, we've been speaking with the folks, the ICE folks, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement folks. At that level, they are very interested in having a long-term presence here, because they don't have anything from here all the way up the coast till Morro Bay and beyond. And as a point of interest, I don't know if you knew about it, but another Ponga was discovered on the beach at Gaviota yesterday, or might have been this morning actually, and was on the beach, they estimated, for 48 hours up at Las Flores Canyon. So it doesn't seem like the operations are ceasing, and so I think we're going to have some interesting ongoing discussions with ICE and Homeland Security.
Any other comments, questions? Mick, I wonder what the range of the boat is?
Madam Chair, that wasn't disclosed to us, but I think they can go out, 100 miles plus.
Okay, so you mentioned there was nothing between here and Morro Bay, and I was wondering if it went up, would go up that far.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they have quite a long range. It's an interesting boat if you get a chance to see it. They come and go from the harbor, but it's built. It's tall and skinny, and so there's a lot of fuel in there, and I'm sure they can go real fast and real far.
Where exactly is it for those of us who don't live in the harbor?
It was in Marina 2.
Okay,
And it's not there right now, but it may be back.
okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Moving on to the facilities management report, Mr. Triberg.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The final phase of the breakwater cap replacement project begins next week. Bruff Construction Company was the low bidder, and they'll be replacing 9 panels along the curved section of the breakwater. The line on the left, you can see there's a slight change in the wall height there. It begins there, and it ends just past the entrance to the Marina 1 gangway. Since the construction is going to occur there, we're going to rebuild a little access deck right through here that's going to provide access for the duration of construction. Construction begins typically with the demolition of the sidewalk itself and takes several weeks. Upon demolition, it exposes what was the original sidewalk that was built in the 1950s, and the elevation varies considerably, considering how old it was in the location. But over the past few phases, we've been able to sort of adjust for those variations in elevation within each 24-foot panel. So people don't notice it when they walk out there, but there is some changes, and this is one of the construction adjustments you need to sort of make on the fly. Once they complete the walkway itself, they'll begin working on the wall. It's a pretty complicated procedure. These are curved forms in this section where it's going to be going. This is obviously the straight section from the last phase. They set all the panels in alternating sections and pour maybe 2 or 3 panels at a time, wait a week, and put the other ones back up. This is the most important part of the work because the wall is really what provides protection to the harbor. This image, I think, was taken in 1983. The actual wall height will be about 6 inches higher than the existing wall height, and that's not done to afford additional protection. It was really for a building code requirement. It was an upgrade in the building code, but it just so happens it's going to provide some incremental level of increased protection for the harbor. As I mentioned, this is the final phase. Here's the cost for the preceding 3 phases. Costs went up a little bit from 2004 to 2009, but were fairly steady. Keep in mind, this last phase is half as many panels as the preceding phases. So it's pretty remarkable that since 2007 to 2012, if you take the cost and cut it in half, it's just about exactly what it was. So construction costs haven't gone up. Turns out about $1.9 million to replace the entire breakwater cap. We'll probably be right back at this again in 30 to 40 years. Don't expect it to last much longer than that. And when that time comes around, there'll probably be some more discussions related to sea level rise and those kind of things and whether or not there should be additional adjustments. My next project this evening has to do with the ice house. Despite recent closures to sort of preemptively fix things we anticipated breaking, there was one that we didn't catch. One of the most important components is the main compressor. And the main compressor is a large compressor at about 1,600 pounds. And all of these pieces of equipment are protected by alarms and shutoff switches. And unfortunately, the shutoff switch for the low-level alarm for this compressor didn't work, and it ran out of oil and seized. And we had no option but to replace it. Considering the demand from the commercial fishermen in the fish market, we issued what was called an emergency purchase order under the authority of the director and the council to go ahead and move forward so we could fix it as quickly as possible. The compressor came from somewhere down south, and it's just incredibly complicated to not only replace this, but also to fix all the component parts. The way the ice house is made up is all the ice making equipment is up on the second story, and the ice bin and the discharge equipment's on the first story. The way it was built, I believe, most of the ice house in the second story was built around the equipment. All the equipment was installed, and then the ice house framing and the roof was built. So in order to get the old compressor out, we had to cut a hole in the roof. And I'm going to play a quick clip, I think I am, of how we went about doing it. So we had to get a very large crane and work with a contractor and the crane operator to extract the old compressor very carefully and put the new $25,000 compressor back in. This doesn't show quite how complicated it was. This is kind of a quick snapshot of about a 4 or 5 hour procedure. But it's really significant. This is a very heavy piece of equipment. It's a vulnerable facility up there, being out at the end of the city pier. It's pretty stable, but things move a little bit. So that just gives you some idea as to what goes on with a project like this. Let's see. So as I mentioned, we issued an emergency purchase order for a total of $34,000, and that was to purchase the compressor itself and for all the labor. It took about 5 weeks. Every time they fixed something, they found something else that was broken. All of the systems are protected, like I mentioned, by alarms and shutoff switches, so they must have gone through a half a dozen of those to make sure they worked perfectly, because the compressor's under warranty, and the supplier, the folks that installed it, they wouldn't release it to us until they were certain that it was going to be secure. So it's back in, it's running. We're still working out bugs today, but we're making ice. And my final thing I want to say is I really like to thank the commercial fishermen in the fish market. They have been incredibly patient. It's a major inconvenience to get ice to keep a commercial operation going. They have to get it from Oxnard. It costs a lot more money. So we're really grateful for their patience and their understanding. And this concludes my presentation this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. Any questions from the commission? So we're moving on to the Harbor Operations Report. Mr. Conran.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, good evening. I'm happy to report that earlier this month, Santa Barbara was able to host 280 very anxious sailors who wanted some shore leave after spending a lot of time on duty off the Somalia coast in anti-piracy operations. They came aboard the USS Halsey. It's a guided missile destroyer. You may have seen it off the coast between September 6th and 9th. It's a 509-foot vessel, and thanks to the organizing abilities and courtesy of the Santa Barbara chapter of the U.S. Navy League, the sailors came ashore and had softball games and had a reception at the yacht club and visited the Reagan Ranch Center in downtown Santa Barbara. And overall, the visit went off without a hitch. Some 900 people got to visit the boat. They got their tickets through Sea Landing, which seems to be the way to go. We've tried a lot of different ways of doing this, and getting the tickets for free, but getting the tickets through Sea Landing and boarding at the same place where they get their tickets seems to have worked out well. So aside from a couple of very, very minor glitches, the visit went very well, and we got a very positive response from the Navy League. Some of you sailors and a few of you motorboaters may be familiar with the Baja Ha, which is I'll try to say that correctly because I might have to say it 2 or 3 times. It's a 750-mile boat rally from San Diego to Cabo San Lucas. It usually takes place in the November-ish time frame. It's been going on since 1994, and I think some 2,500 boaters have taken part in this. And the organizers of this rally came to us in the early spring this year and said, we'd kind of like to try a Southern California Tata ahead of the Baja Ha. And basically what the Southern California Tata was, they wanted to organize a rally that would begin in the city of Santa Barbara, that we would host the boats here, and would continue from here to Santa Cruz Island, and from Santa Cruz Island to Paradise Cove, and they would conclude in King Harbor. And we thought it was a great idea for a lot of reasons. Number one, it would be sort of a bookend to our other really high-end regatta, or important regatta to us in the summertime, being the King Harbor Regatta. And it would be after Labor Day, and it would be really kind of a nice way to bring a conclusion to the summer boating season. So early in September, we had 27 boats. We hosted 27 boats in Santa Barbara Harbor. We were able to find a spot for all of them. It was a little touch and go because with this first year we didn't work off a reservation system, so it was first come, first served. But we managed to get all 27 of them in. They're ranged in length from 32 to 50 feet. And from all that we read in Latitude magazine, the publisher of which was the organizer of this race, he has a boat called the Profligate, all was well. They had a great time. The weather was good. They were well received here. They were well received in King Harbor. And actually, they went out of their way to give kudos to Harbor Patrol for all of the assistance they provided in getting boats in their proper places when they were here. So we're very excited about the notion of this happening annually if they're interested. But I think they're going to have to sort of take the temperature of the people who participated, see if they liked it, and see if they'd be interested in doing it again, and maybe next year, maybe even bigger and better. So it was a success, and we'll look forward to seeing how they feel about continuing it. And finally, yes, indeed, it is around the corner. This will be the last presentation you hear before the Harbor Festival, which is next month on the 13th of October, Saturday. And we've got it all again. Forgive me, I'm going to have to look at my notes because I'll surely forget something if I don't. But we have fresh crab and lobster, live crab, oysters and shrimp, barbecued albacore, lobster bisque, paella, sea urchin, uni, seafood gumbo, clam chowder, fish tacos, and more. And that's just the seafood side of it. We have 40 arts and crafts vendors. We have a dozen public agencies and nonprofits out on the city pier. We've got free boat rides, tall ship tours, tours of the Coast Guard boat, tours of the Harbor Patrol boats. It's going to be the same rockin' affair. We're going to have live music on the stage behind the in back of the 125 building, and all the organizing is coming together very cleanly. All the vendor spots have been spoken for. All the agencies who occupy the city pier have been have arranged to have their spots reserved. And one good thing this year that we didn't have last year, we usually try and coincide this with it comes on the second Saturday of every October, and it usually coincides closely with the opening of lobster season. The last couple of years, it almost coincided too closely, where the season opened Wednesday, and the Harbor Festival was on Saturday, and so these poor guys are out for 72 hours fishing hard and charging and without any sleep and, grinding and just in time to get back for the festival. This year, there's a full 10 days. It comes on, I think the first is on a Wednesday, the first or second, and it's all the second Saturday gives them 10 days to fish, get squared away. So we should have a lot of lobster product this year. Also working with the crab fishermen, we expect a donation of 1,500 pounds or so of crab for the crab booth. So it's business as usual. We haven't changed a lot because we don't think a lot is broken. It's a festival that we're very proud of, a signature event for the harbor. And again, we encourage folks to be there on Saturday, October 13th from 10 to 5, and they can also find all details online at www.harborfestival.org. That's www.harborfestival.org. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'd just like to add one thing that Mick mentioned. We'll be having the same musical lineup we've had for the last 3 or 4 years, with featuring the local band, John Payne's band, The Ride, and also Spencer, ever popular Spencer the Gardener, and also Fish in the Seaweeds up from San Diego. So I just wanted to plug the music a little bit. It's been a big upgrade to the festival.
Great, thanks very much. Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you, Mick. Just one observation, and I know we did it we did some of it last year, but was encouraging bike transportation. And I know there's bike valets. It's just the parking gets really limited because it's such a popular event. And at other events that have grown from their smaller sizes, the bike valet is truly great because people just leave their bikes there and takes care of the bike all day for them.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, thank you so much for the reminder. We have yet to issue the press release for this festival, and I think you've just put a burr in the back of my brain. I think we should put something in the press release encouraging alternative transportation. We'll mention the bike valet.
Any other questions, comments from anybody? I guess that concludes. Thank you very much, Mick, for the report, and thank you, Eric, for the comment. I didn't know about it. I often bike there. I didn't know about the valet there. On now to new business. And Mary, would you read the staff recommendations, please?
Lease agreement with Brophy & Sons, Inc. Recommendation that Harbor Commission consider and recommend City Council approval of a 23-year lease agreement with Brophy & Sons, Inc., doing business as Brophy Brothers Restaurant and Clam Bar, and on the alley at an average base rent of $35,800 per month, or 10% of gross sales, whichever is greater.
Fossey or Mr. Reedman?
Good evening, Madam Chair. I'll deliver this report to you this evening. If you think you've just seen this lease and why are you seeing it again, you're right. This lease was actually approved in August of 2010 by the Harbor Commission a little over 2 years ago. And as Mary said, it was a 25-year lease. In January of 2011, Brophy's assumed that lease assumed the lease of the former Minnow Cafe. And they operated the Minnow Cafe until October of last year, at which time they closed for a major renovation. They opened up with On the Alley in May of 2012, just a few short months ago. They've been doing a great business down there ever since, and I'm sure you've all been down there to take part in their wonderful food products and drinks. This particular lease before you today is, although Brophy Brothers and On the Alley operate under different business models and they are separate entities, functionally the lease spaces are now the same. They do, in a sense, share some space. And so for the proposed lease combines the two restaurant spaces as well as the rent obligations into one lease contract, which then simplifies the rent payments. It simplifies the accounting on their end of things, and it just makes the whole operation on both ends, both from the city side as well as from the Brophy side, a whole lot cleaner. As for the terms of the lease, as Mary stated, the base rent is roughly $35,800. So that's, again, the Brophy's base rent plus the On the Alley base rent. Their percentage rent continues to be 10% of the gross sales, escalating to 11% at $3 million. So there's no change there. They do have an annual cost of living increase or CPI increase included in that. And again, the term, what they'll do is they'll finish out, if you approve this and it moves to council, or if you recommend this for council approval, they'd finish out the last 3 years of this 5-year term, and then they have 4 more 5-year terms, so a total of 23 years. That's how you get that strange number there. As you know, Brophy Brothers is the second largest rent-generating tenant. They produce approximately 12% of the department's annual property management revenue. We're happy to see On the Alley up and running very smoothly and doing a great deal of business. And that concludes my report for the Brophy's and On the Alley lease.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, just a quick question. In the in the notes in the breakout, it has the base rent at $38,500, and in the recommendation, it has it at $35,800. Which one is real?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, that would be $35,800. That was
$35,800.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
Any other questions, comments? Then, do I have a motion to recommend?
So moved?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Then it carries, motion carries. So, moving rapidly along. And so the next of the new business is the fiscal year 2012 preliminary budget review. Mr. Reedman.
Recommendation that
Oh,
Harbor
sorry,
Commission
Mary.
receive a staff report providing a brief summary of the Waterfront Department's revenues and expenditures as of June 30th, 2012, and provide comments as appropriate.
Madam Chair, Brian Bossy is going to deliver this year-end review.
Mr. Bossy.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Sorry, we had a small technical glitch there. Good evening. Tonight, I'm here to present to you the department's preliminary budget review. Now, just as a reminder, we call it preliminary because the city's final numbers have not been released yet. It usually takes them a number of months after the July 1st or June 30th closing to get us those. I wouldn't anticipate any major changes in what you're going to see today. There might be some dollars and cents here and there. If there are any major changes, we'll be sure to let you know. With that, let's jump right into the revenue component of our program. This is a very simplified version of our overall revenues. We'll go through each of these individually as my presentation continues. First, we have property management, and this is comparing our budgeted amount for 2012 versus our actual amount for 2012. You can see overall at the bottom there, we come out about 4.07% ahead of what we had budgeted. Always a good thing. We like to see that. And a variance that equals about $478,000. And again, I'm going to go through each one of these individually. Property management is our first group we're going to look at. We've seen, like I said on the last slide, quite a good solid increase of 8% over what was budgeted. We have Wharf Commercial coming in at about $83,000 over fiscal year 2011. That's what I want to, this is a little different than your last chart. We're pulling this. The last chart showed you budgeted versus actual 2012. What I'm going to show you from here on out is actual versus 2011. So I just want to make that clear. So what we have here is Wharf Commercial. We've, over fiscal year 2011, we're up $83,000. Our Wharf Food Service is up $78,000. So good years on both Wharf Commercial and Wharf Food Service. Harbor Commercial is just a slight increase at approximately $7,800, and our Harbor Food Service has gone up just a little. It's just about even, just above even. We have had some miscellaneous revenues. The overwhelming majority of that was via the cruise ships that have come to visit the Santa Barbara waterfront. Continuing on with revenue, our financial management. Our interest income for fiscal year 2011 totaled $160,588. That's down about $27,000 or 14.73% over fiscal year 2011. And as for our interest income, this is not something we come up with. This is something that our folks over in the finance department come up with and do their best job. As you know, we're kind of in a very turbulent financial world these days, so this isn't too surprising. Of course, we wish it'd be in the positive, but in fact, it's not. We hope for better things come next year. Our parking services had a good year this past year. We've come up about 13.9% or $277,000 over fiscal year 2011. The biggest increases were seen at Stearns Wharf Parking. We had an increase of about $32,000 over fiscal year 11. Our Harbor Main lot, $72,000 over fiscal year 11. And our Harbor West lot, about $36,000 over fiscal year 2011. Marina management, overall, up 4.4% over fiscal year 2011. Our slip transfer fees were up approximately $185,000. Our slip rentals were up a little over $115,000. The interesting thing with marina management this year was that overall it was up 4.4%, but if you go into the detail of the items, the only things that were actually up were slip rental and slip transfer fees. Obviously, these are the majority, the big dollar items in that particular component, but they were up significantly over the previous year, so that's why you see that 4.4%, although all the other categories were in the negative. But again, they were in the negative, very small, most of them were very small numbers. Next is our total revenue. In summary, total revenue is at $12,228,354. Our fiscal year 2012 budget target was $11,750,000. So looking at that, we are about $478,000 over budget. That's where that 4.04% comes in. And then looking back to a fiscal year, comparing it to fiscal year 2011, we were up 6.72% or $770,000. We hope these numbers continue to go up and hopefully see a turnaround in the general economy. Now we'll go to the other half, expenditure summary. Getting right to the bottom there, we were $569,293 under budget. That's what our preliminary numbers have shown. And again, with this, we're going to break this out individually and go through each of them. As you can see, most of the categories were under budget or at budget. We do have a few that were over budget, and we'll get into those. First off, salaries and benefits. They totaled $5.37 million through June 30th of 2012. Overall, again, they were below the target for the second consecutive year. Our fiscal year 2012 budget target was $5.461 million, and again, we came under that by about $90,000 or minus 1.65%. Supplies and services. Overall, they were slightly over budgeted amounts to the tune of about $73,946. The two primary reasons for that, One was $48,000 in additional expenses related to cruise ship visits. Those obviously come with a price tag, primarily with MTD and police, having a police presence down there that we do pay for. And then the second component was about $24,000 in permit fees related to the dry dock and working on that whole process. So those are our supplies and services. Debt service, a little over $1.4 million through June 30th, 2012. Overall, our debt service continues to come in under budget. This, again, is primarily due to timing issues with the DBAW payment processing. So it takes them a while to process that. And so what happens is, in the interim, we realize a little bit of a benefit. Of course, they'll catch up with us sooner or later, but it might not be till it's all over. But we're prepared for that. So we came in about $256,000 under budget for 14.43%. Total expenditures for the year, $11,607,093 through June 30th of 2012. Our budget target was $11,981,963. So we were about $374,000 under budget, or minus 3.13%. We're always happy to see that. And I believe that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding those numbers.
Thank you very much, Brian, for the report. Are there any questions? Commissioner Sloan?
Thanks, Brian. I actually have 4 questions, so I'll just take them in order here. So the parking revenue being up, I noticed that the west lot was one of those areas. How much do you attribute to the auto pay system that we put in place, or have we been able to measure that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, that's a great question. And that's something we're still trying to deal with. We'd like to say it was due to the automated parking system. Other cities who have gone to this automated parking system generally see or have seen about a 30% increase in their parking revenues. We hope that's going to be the same for us, and that would be great. I think overall it's a little too early to really make a definitive statement as to, yes, that was due to the parking systems. You know, I would imagine it's that, as well as, you know, you have some events down there that can boost up revenue rather quickly over a weekend. So we would like to attribute some of that, yes, to the automated parking system.
By virtue of the fact the others are up, if that was the only one that was up, you could probably say it was due largely to that, but since the other ones are up.
Exactly. And as information comes forward, as we continue to roll through this process, we'll have a whole lot more information. I anticipate next year we'll have a more definitive statement for you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, if I may, we tracked the revenue. We track it weekly throughout the fiscal year, and since the Harbor West self-pay machines went online July 1st, the very beginning of the fiscal year, we were able to see the pattern all the way through the year. And the Harbor West machines were up 35%, as I think I've reported here earlier, throughout the year, from the very first month to the very last, very consistent. Overall, parking was up 10 or 11% throughout the year. So I'm fairly comfortable saying about 25% of that is attributable to the new machines and people being able to use their credit card.
Increased compliance and things like that. Great, thanks. The next question is on the slips increase, the slip fee increase. Is that just the fee increase, the percentage increase that we have built in every year? Or is there something else that we attribute that increase to?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, that's a great question, and it's something, as we poured through these numbers, something we were dealing with as well. You know, I think it's in talking with Mick and Scott, I think it's a combination of things. The number of slip transfer fees over the past 3 years we looked into, and this year was 55. Fiscal year 11, it was 52. Fiscal year 10, it was 61. So we're seeing about the same level of transfers. We do think that part of it is the slip fee increase, but also I think we don't keep a real tight track on it, but I think it's also bigger slips.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. So just the slip rental income, is that just the annual increase? So, you know, we have different increase percentages for different size slips. So if you ran that through a spreadsheet, will it be about that?
Well,
Chair, Commissioner Sloan, We did a 3% slip fee increase last year, which would not account for that $115,000 extra. That would probably be more on the lines of, more on the lines of 90,000 or so. So there, it could be people coming off temporary cancellation status and things like that.
Okay.
So it's an interesting anomaly. It deserves some looking into.
Then I have two more. I'm sorry. I don't mean to take all the time. The salaries and benefits being down, why is that on the expense side?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, part of it would probably, when I looked into it, would be the fact that for quite some time, Mr. Reedman was doing two jobs at once. He was performing both the business manager position as well as the interim director. So I think that's a major component of it. I'm here, so you won't see that next year. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering why. And then the last thing is...
Well, I hope you won't be seeing that next year, I should say.
The last thing is so we talked about the revenue, miscellaneous revenue being up largely to cruise ship visits. But then we talked about services and supplies expenses being up largely due to cruise ships. So is a cruise ship a net positive for us?
Another great question. Yes, there is a net positive to the cruise ships, definitely. We just want to make sure that everybody knows that's not just, they don't just pull up and unload a bunch of passengers and everybody reaps the benefits. There is a cost associated with that, but overall it is definitely a plus for the harbor.
And when I say a net positive, I mean strictly from a financial standpoint. There are a lot of other benefits to having it here besides the financial. So my question was just strictly a financial question.
Very much so,
Thank
yes.
You. Thank you. That's it.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Webb.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Webb, the waterfront does receive regular bills from the police department for their presence when cruise ships arrive. So the merchants don't contribute or help with these? Madam Chair, no, they do not. This is strictly a waterfront expense that's then turned over to the police department.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, I'm going to go back to Commissioner Sloan touched on 2 points that I had noted. And in the marina revenue, it seems, there, except for the cruise ships, where we had a revenue uptick, if we had a 2.99% revenue increase and we raised the slip fees by 3%, that's pretty close. That's what the number says, and I just double-checked it with the little old Jim Dandy calculator. So it seems the fee increase is what gave us the increase there. And in the slip transfer fees, maybe down the line we can do something like keep track of how many linear feet in each one of the categories so we get some notion of what's driving that, because I know there's always a $25 per foot increase going in there. And if we were to take out those increases, I think that would end up mostly being flat, which would take away a lot of our growth in that area. So thank heavens that we are moving those fees along. Just something to consider.
Any other questions, comments? And thank you very much for the report, Brian. And now moving on to staff commission communication. I believe that there's a letter, Mr. Friedman?
Madam Chair, we just have one small item. There was a very complimentary letter to the editor that was published in the Santa Barbara News Press op-ed page earlier this week, Monday or Tuesday, regarding Skip Abed, the owner-operator of the Santa Barbara Sailing Center, and his management methods coping with the recession. He was able to apparently take a pay cut, a significant pay cut on his own behalf to retain all of his 50-some-odd employees at his operation. I know he had some that moved on due to their own reasons, but he's kept the morale good there among his employees without having to lay people off, and still managed to do fairly well for himself. And Skip and his crew do a great job at the sailing center, as you well know. We recently renegotiated a lease with him. He's very happy to be there. And it was just such a positive and refreshing letter that we felt it worthy of an honorable mention. So congratulations to Skip and his crew over a job well done.
Thank you, and I think the letter was from Dan Bolter of West Marine, assistant manager there. Anyone else, any comments? Then I guess time for a motion.
May,
Yes?
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.